It's showdown time on Lake Washington. Showdown time for two of the sport's fastest boats. The turbine-powered Tosti Asti, driven by this man, Steve Reynolds, has run like crazy all year, only to be victimized by a run of incredibly bad luck. Reynolds badly wants to beat this man, Chip Hanauer, pilot of the Atlas Van Lines, the boat that many think might become the most dominant sled in sports history. It's the Atlas and the Tosti. Showdown time. Next.
From Seattle, Washington, this is the Seafair 7-Eleven Freedom Cup, brought to you by Ford and your local Ford dealer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Don Poyer, and welcome to Seattle, Washington for the 1984 7-Eleven Freedom Cup. Now, this is stop number 7 on the 84 circuit, only 1 week after the Gold Cup, which took place in Tri-Cities, Washington, 4 hours to the east from here. It's been a rather quiet week. That's good news, because it means that the boats are all right. No major damage coming out of the Gold Cup, and that means the fastest fleet yet for 1984. One of the boats that ran extremely well last week was the Squire Shop with Mickey Riemann, especially in the final heat. In that final, he ran away from everybody at the start, and only a couple of laps into the race, however, he broke down while trying to fight off the eventual winner, the Atlas Van Lines and Chip Hanauer. Jim Hendrick, my fellow announcer for this 84 circuit, is down there with Mickey right now.
Don, the man we're with right now, Mickey Riemann, had the Gold Cup right where he wanted to for 3 full laps and then troubles. Now, you're the hometown boat considered. You're from Seattle. How does this race look to you?
Oh, it looks fine. The weather's kind of acting up a little bit right now, but I feel it'll get better as the day goes on. And after all, I won here in '73 in the rain, so we really don't care that much.
It's going to be a long, tough day for these hydros if they can fight the weather. Now let's take a look at Heat 1A, the way they line up. Heat 1A will see the light all-star in action. Tommy Deeth, the driver, checked in at 116.414 miles per hour. The Kawaguchi Travel at 117.9. The Miss Executone Telephone, 127.2. The Squire Shop at 132.3. The Miss Budweiser at 134.7. And the Atlas Van Lines, the high qualifier, at 137.6. And that's the way they stack up in Heat 1A. For the lineup for Heat 1B, let's go to Don Poyer.
First of all, the U-22, the Joe Ritchie Spirit of Detroit with Todd Yarling, qualifying at better than 113 miles per hour. American Speedy Printing with Ron Snyder at 124.189. The U-40 with Scott Pierce, the Oboyo Birdo at 115.9 miles per hour. The KZOK Machine Band, the U-20 with Jerry Hopp, a local boy out of the Northwest, 112.6. The Miss Renault with Milner Irvin out of Miami, the U-3 at 117.7 miles per hour. And the turbine-powered Miss Tosti Asti with Steve Reynolds at 132.6 miles per hour, the U-10. That'll do it for Heat 1A and 1B. Jim and I will be right back with the racing in just a minute. Welcome back to Seattle. Don Poyer along with Jim Hendrick, and we have an unexpected visitor. Vice President George Bush is in the pits with Jim.
Mr. Vice President, you're a powerboat man, an ex-Navy man. What do you think of that boat?
I think it looks awful swift for me. I got a deep V-hull cigarette, and I believe the Miss Budweiser would whip me. So I want to watch it in action out there. I want to see it.
Back up to you, Don.
All right, and welcome, Mr. Vice President. Here's the rundown for Heat 1A. The Atlas, the Budweiser, the Squire Shop, Executone, 4 of the hottest boats on the tour. Some past winners in Seattle. Jim Kropfeld getting his first win in Seattle last year. Chip Hanauer, Dean Chenoweth, and of course Bill Muncy dominated for years. Drivers in 1A, Tom Deeth out of Detroit, and the Light All-Star owned by R.B. Bob Taylor of Houston. Ron Armstrong and the Kawaguchi Travel, a very heavy boat owned by Bob Patterson out of Southern California. George Johnson and the Miss Executone Telephones, performing now, racing in front of their hometown crowd. They love a win here. So would Mickey Riemann, number 2 in national points in the Squires shop. Number 1 in points, this man, Jim Kropfeld on the Miss Budweiser, a winner here last year, as we said earlier. And another man from Seattle, Chip Hanauer and the turbine-powered Atlas Van Lines. That's the rundown for Heat 1A. And into the north third now on this 2.5-mile course, which runs north and south in Seattle. On the inside, to the right of your screen, is the Miss Budweiser with Jim Kropfeld aboard. To the left of him is the Squires shop. And Mickey Riemann, now based in Seattle, right here in front of his hometown fans. Here we go with the start with Heat 1A. And it appears that the Squires shop with Mickey Riemann may have jumped the gun. In the meantime, he has the lane number 2. On lane number 1 is the Budweiser with Jim Kropfeld heading into the south turn. On the outside is the U80. That's the Kawaguchi Travel with Ron Armstrong. And in lane number 3 is George Johnson and the Executone Telephones. Where's the Atlas Van Lines? It's way back, way back. And as a matter of fact, the Light All-Star did not even start. So it's a 5-boat race as they go into the south turn. The Budweiser in first place with Jim Kropfeld aboard, going into that north turn now along the log boom. A lot of real tough rollers out there. The boats are going to have a tough time with a lot of air underneath. They don't like the parallel rollers, are what they're called, which makes the boats rather rock back and forth, and it's very hard to sustain any kind of fast speed. The Squires shop right now running in second place will have to get word on whether or not Mickey Riemann jumped the gun. You see the Budweiser, the national point leader here in 1984, going around the south turn. In third place, maybe second, the Executone Telephones with George Johnson. Atlas Van Lines back quite a ways. Some engine problems early on for Chip Hanauer here in 1A. Down the backstretch, first place the Bud, second place that man, Chip Hanauer, check that, Mickey Riemann and the Squires shop. Coming down to complete lap number 2 is the Budweiser with Jim Kropfeld aboard. Let's get a speed, 122.9 miles per hour. The Budweiser in first place. Second place, Squires shop, Mickey Riemann. And in the battle for 4th and 5th, it's the U80 on the inside, Atlas Van Lines on the outside.
Turbines over there. Turbines way back.
Bernie Little, the owner of the Budweiser, yes, his crew just telling him that the Atlas Van Lines are slowed down. More trouble for Chip Hanauer and the Atlas Van Lines. Dead in the water, we'll see if they get started again, but that's what Chip sees is the rooster tail of the Budweiser going into the north turn with Jim Kropfeld. Kropfeld with 7 unlimited hydroplane victories coming into this race in Seattle, Washington. Second place, Mickey Riemann. Now you see the lead by the Budweiser as they go around the north turn. Jim Kropfeld out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and the Budweiser. A wedding took place on this boat just a couple of days ago. Hard to believe, isn't it? Bernie Little calls it the love boat. The Budweiser in first place. Second place, the Squires shop and Mickey Riemann. Now, wait a minute. We have official word now. The Squires shop has been penalized 1 lap for jumping the gun. So that means now that Mickey Riemann is in 5th place, and that is the battle for 3rd and 4th. The Atlas Van Lines is running again on the inside of the U80, the Kawaguchi Travel with Ron Armstrong. That is the 3rd and 4th place battle with Executone in 2nd place. Mickey Riemann is in last place with the Squire shop, and the Budweiser is on top. The Atlas Van Lines running past the U80 now as he tries to get some points. Chip Hanauer, we have only 2 heats here, so you've got to grab points when you can to get into the final. Jim Kropfeld in first place with the Budweiser coming into the south turn on a very gray day here in Seattle. The water not very forgiving, especially in the south turn, and as he goes down the back chute along the log boom. Executone Telephones right now in 2nd place. The Budweiser in 1st. The Atlas Van Lines is in 3rd place right now. Chip Hanauer, winner of 3 straight Gold Cups, and of course a winner 1 week ago in the Gold Cup in the Tri-Cities area of Washington State. The Budweiser with Jim Kropfeld looking for his 8th victory in the Unlimited Circuit. Jim Kropfeld out of Cincinnati, driving for Bernie Little in his 3rd year. And here's your winner of Heat 1A, Jim Kropfeld and the Bud. 2nd place will not go to the Squires shop. He has been penalized 1 lap. And here's your battle for 2nd place. On the inside is the Executone Telephones. On the outside, Chip Hanauer and the Atlas Van Lines. Here's the finish. Atlas Van Lines, Chip Hanauer, 2nd place. Let's go to the Atlas camp with Jim Hendrick.
Down here now with Jim Lucero. Jim, what happened out there? What's something wrong with the power?
Well, what happened is the water was pretty lumpy out there, and the boat was reacting up in the air, and every time Chip would pull his foot out of it, the fire would go out. You know, the thing just doesn't like, violent throttle movements like that, so we just have to feather the thing. We're going to have to do a little bit with the boat ride for the 2nd heat, keep him from having to jerk his foot out of it like that.
Thank you, Jim.
Point-wise, here's how they stand. The Budweiser with the 400 points, Atlas Van Lines with 300, Executone Telephones, and it goes on down the line. And now to the winner with Jim Hendrick.
All right, now let's get to the winning driver taking a swig of refreshment here. How rough was it out there, Jim?
Well, it's average for Seattle. It's very rough. There's a lot of rollers coming back from the pleasure boats back there, and it's terrible on the straightaways.
Yeah, the start nailed on the insides. That's where you wanted to be?
Well, that's what I thought I'd try this time. I had a few figures down, and I studied them, and it worked out perfect. Of course, I noticed some of the other guys were way down here in the turn when they should have been up there getting ready for the start. They were all late.
That's the story from down here in the pit area of the Budweiser camp.
All right, James, you see them in all sizes and all speeds here on Lake Washington. We'll be back with Heat 1B in just a moment. Back to Lake Washington here in Seattle. Earlier we told you that the Squire Shop was penalized 1 lap for jumping the gun in Heat 1A. Jim Hendrick is with Mickey Riemann right now.
Mickey, I ask you again, you jumped the clock?
That's what they tell me. It's hard to tell out there. The starting clock is so far away from where we're running that you've got to look, 90 degrees off your right shoulder to see it. According to my watch, I was okay.
Well, that means that you're going to have to really set up hard in the next heat to make the final.
Yeah, I don't know what we ended up 4th, 169 in points, I guess. You need a lot of points to make the final, so we're just going to have to keep an eye on everyone else and figure out what we need.
Thanks, Mick.
You bet.
All right, let's move on. The rundown for Heat 1B. The Tosti Asti with Steve Reynolds, got to be a favorite. Highest qualifying speed in that heat. And while we're here, let's look at some of the records on Lake Washington. In 1980, for a 5-lap race, 2.5-mile course, Bill Munsey still holds the record. For 1-lap competition lap, Jim Kropfeld in the Budweiser at better than 1:31, set last year. And in 1982, Chip Hanauer set the qualifying record here of better than 140 miles per hour. Let's look at the drivers. First of all, the U-20, the KZOK Machine Band. Jerry Hopp, a Northwest boy. He'll be racing in the U-20 today. Todd Yarling, he was co-rookie of the year in 1983, driving the Joe Ritchie Spirit of Detroit out of Madison, Indiana. Scotty Pierce, again out of Seattle, driving the Oh Boy Alberto, owned by Fred Leland. Milner Irvin, out of Coral Gables, Miami, driving the Miss Renault, number 4 in points in the country so far. Ron Snyder in the American Speedy Printing. Boy, they've had engine problems the past few weeks. Let's see how they do today. Steve Reynolds and the Miss Tosti Asti, the turbine-powered boat. Steve, again, out of Seattle. 15 seconds away from the start of Heat 1B. On the inside is the Miss Renault as they come down that long straightaway before the starting line. American Speedy Printing is out in the lead right now as they come down to the starting line. American Speedy Printing, Ron Snyder, he is one of the best when it comes to the start. Ron Snyder, American Speedy Printing. Oh, look at, he's way out of attitude. Again, hitting those parallel rollers. You can see him on the right of the screen as he is rolling all over the place, but manages to hold on and take control going into the south turn. American Speedy Printing with Ron Snyder aboard. The only conventional boat out here, but now, oh, he's slowing down. Ron Snyder, evidently blowing an engine, has gone dead in the water. Here's the Tosti Asti just coming into the south turn. The favorite in this heat, Steve Reynolds. He's got problems, evidently. The leader, Joe Ritchie, Spirit of Detroit on the left. Here is your 3rd and 4th place race with the U-20 and the Oh Boy Alberto. Scotty Pierce aboard, going down the back chute again where it's very, very turbulent. Coming down the main chute now, about to complete lap number 1, is the Miss Renault with Milner Irvin out of Miami, Florida. An airplane pilot, has a couple of planes, a Piper twin engine and a single engine airplane. The Miss Renault in 1st place. In 2nd place is the Joe Ritchie Spirit of Detroit with Todd Yarling aboard out of Madison, Indiana. 3rd place, the Oh Boy Alberto with Scotty Pierce, the U-40. Here's the leader into that south turn and back to the KZOK Machine Band, the U-20 based out of Seattle. Bill McFadden, the owner, and the Tosti Asti as you go aboard the boat with Steve Reynolds and the Tosti Asti in our Hitachi boat camera. We'll look at that more as the day goes on. Milner Irvin going into the north turn now. This is Scotty Pierce and the Oh Boy Alberto, owned by Fred Leland. The Miss Renault coming down the south turn now with a sizable lead. You see the Tosti Asti making a move against the KZOK Machine Band, advancing up into the field. He had evidently some engine problems as again you go aboard and you go past the entrance buoy, around the turn and heading down due south here in Seattle, Washington. Look how wet it gets as he goes around the rooster tail of the boat in front of him, and now they head south. Steve Reynolds on the outside trying to challenge now and move up into the field after a horrible start. He may have gotten washed down. We'll have to wait and see. Steve Reynolds, the Vietnam veteran, trying to go against the Boy Alberto and Scotty Pierce. That's who you see to the left of him as they go into the south turn. Back to the leader, and Milner Irvin. He has a son who races go-karts, as a matter of fact. Milner likes to be the chief engineer for him, but right now he's got his hands full with a very big 28-foot unlimited hydroplane. And he has just gone dead in the water. The Miss Renault is conked out and pulled onto the infield, so we have a new leader, this man right here, Joe Ritchie, Spirit of Detroit, with Todd Yarling aboard. Out of Madison, Indiana, Jim Sedam, the owner of this boat. He is in first place. And Tosti Asti has now moved up into second place. You see the rooster tail of the Joe Ritchie in front of Steve Reynolds. You see what he sees, trying to give chase to that boat right there in the south third, the Joe Ritchie, Spirit of Detroit. Again, the perspective shot showing you the size of a lead for Joe Ritchie, Spirit of Detroit. That boat out of Madison, Indiana, a John Steinecker design. Again, you see what it looks like to be an unlimited hydroplane driver. And he's going down through the treacherous back chute now in Seattle with those parallel rollers, are what they call it, where the boats go along the wake rather than going against them. And it's very difficult to hold on to maintain the right kind of attitude you like to in an unlimited hydroplane. Now heading south, coming down the main chute, the second place boat, the Tosti Asti, the turbine-powered boat owned by Steve Woomer out of Kent, Washington, just 30 miles south of here. Into the south turn, again the leader, Todd Yarling, holding on. He got a second place down in Miami in the first race of 1984. A very consistent boat. They had a lot of problems in Detroit and in Madison, but until then they showed steady improvement. Todd Yarling, a young driver out of Madison as well. He has shown great improvement as well as his boat has. The Tosti in second place. Steve Reynolds, you can see, not running very fast. Anytime you see spray coming up around the sponsons like that, you know he's not moving all that fast. Not a very healthy Tosti Asti at this stage. But first place belongs to this man, Todd Yarling, and the Joe Ritchie, Spirit of Detroit. 400 points to Todd and company. 300 to the Tosti Asti. So here are the numbers. Tosti Asti taking second. Moving on down the line, Renault and American Speedy Printing failing to finish. Let's go down to the Tosti Asti camp, find out what happened.
We'll try to find out what happened to Steve. Excuse me, sir. Steve, what happened out there?
Well, we're almost in the same condition we had at Pasco, Jim. We're just not establishing and maintaining our lane. So the damage here is worse than it was in Pasco. At least I was able to keep the engine running. But we took on so much water that we've damaged the compressor, and I was compressor stalling the whole way around.
What slot were you looking for when that happened?
Well, I thought I was establishing about lane 3. And you know, Lee Shaneth cautioned us at the drivers' meeting yesterday. The course line and the shore line do not run parallel. And I think some of the guys may have got that confused.
An upset driver, to be sure. Back up to you, Don.
Here's where the trouble started. The Tosti during the start of the race. Suddenly from the right side comes American Speedy Printing, and that did him in. Let's go to the winner's camp for 1B.
Don, I don't know if you can see a smile on this guy's face, but his first heat win ever in Unlimiteds. And rough out there.
Oh, it's real rough out there.
What did you know? Did you know Tosti was trying to catch you?
Yeah, I saw him a couple times. I was keeping an eye on him pretty close.
On that start, you know, you didn't get that good of a start, but you actually were able to keep the boat going.
Well, it was a mess out there. I was really wondering if I was going to make it to the starting line or not, but it kept on running.
Todd Yarling, Joe Ritchie, Spirit of Detroit Special, the winner of Heat 1B.
In the meantime, Jim, work going on at the Tosti Asti, and they have a break. They will be in Heat 2B, not 2A. We'll return with more racing on Lake Washington in a minute. Don Poyer along with Jim Henrik along the shores of Lake Washington. Jim is in the Renault camp right now, which had to pull out of Heat 1B.
Don, a little while ago, I talked to Jerry Shaneth, owner of the Renault, and he said that the damage is so extensive it might not be able to be repaired for the rest of the season. A decision is going to have to be made. The driver, Milner Irvin, is with me. Milner, when did it go and when did you feel it?
I sure did, Jim. It really shook the back of the boat. Of course, when you lose a blade off of a 3-blade prop, it really gets violent, and I felt it go in the turn down there, about the third lap, I guess.
Out for the day and maybe out for the season. How do you feel about that?
Well, that doesn't make me very happy. Even out for the day is kind of disappointing, and I hope we can get it finished and fixed before San Diego.
Don?
All right, Jim, we move on here in Seattle. And due to the withdrawal of the Miss Renault, the Kenny Toyota Volvo, the first alternate, has been added to the field for Heat 2A. The Atlas Van Line's got to be a favorite, and here we go with the second heat. And again, the boats begin to gather up in the north turn towards the floating bridge. You see the Seattle floating bridge near Mercer Island here, very close to downtown Seattle. As the start of Heat 2A is coming up, the Boy Alberto way out in front of everybody, and the Kenny Toyota moving up. Here they come now for the start of Heat 2A. We've got 5 boats out on the course running down into that south turn. I'm not sure where the Squire shop is right now. It was last seen on the infield, but in the meantime, we'll call it for you as they come down into that south. There's the Squire shop on the infield. It looks like the boat is running all right. Some sort of problem for Mickey Reeman in the Squire shop. There's the leader, the Atlas Van Lines, coming around and going down the back chute. And you see the rooster tail of the Squire shop. Something obviously wrong with the Squire team, the boat. We'll have to get a word later on after the heat. Already a commanding lead for the Atlas Van Lines. There's Earl Hall and the Kenny Toyota. He goes by the Squire shop on the infield. There's the big lead we talked about now for the Atlas Van Lines, the turbine-powered boat, brand new. Of course, it missed the first couple of races as Jim Lucero, the team co-owner and designer, was putting it together. The Executone telephones with George Johnson in second place, another Lucero designed boat. This one powered by a Merlin Rolls-Royce engine, however, instead of the turbine. Brand new boat and getting a lot of air under the boat as he comes down the main chute. Chip Hanauer, though, the boat running much better now than it did in the first heat of the day, as he has a commanding lead going around the south turn and heading down the log boom, where many pleasure boats here in Seattle come up every year to watch as close as you can get to this course. The battle for 4th and 5th, the Joe Ritchie Spirit of Detroit and the Oboy Brito on the outside. Scotty Pierce in the Oboy going past the Joe Ritchie with Todd Garland down the back chute. Again, back to your leader, Chip Hanauer. Been driving boats as he bounces around. Been driving boats since back when he was about 10 years old. He and his father, Stan Hanauer, now a member of the Atlas crew and works on the turbine engines, decided we'll make it a career. And there's Fran Muncy. She's the co-owner of the Atlas Van Lines boat, along with Jim Lucero, and of course the Atlas Van Lines company being the winningest sponsor in unlimited hydroplane history. John Love to his right. And they watch that boat right there. Chip Hanauer and the Atlas Van Lines, the turbine-powered boat. They say it's the way of the future, and as soon as they get the consistency problems ironed out, I don't see anything touching it. Many, many more boats going to the turbine power. You'll see Jerry Shaineth and the Miss Renault camp going to the turbine-powered source next year in a brand new boat. Chip Hanauer out of Seattle, Washington, a graduate of Washington State University, in total command, has control here in Heat 2A. He'll get another 400 points. That would give him 700 for the day. This, of course, is George Johnson out of Seattle, an owner of a small fleet of fishing boats. That's what he does for a living. This is what he does for fun. One of the owners for the Executone telephone boat. And, of course, Chip Hanauer now going past the Oboy Brito, lapping Scotty Pierce, picking up a little water, as a matter of fact. Again, the water is much worse than it appears from here. It's much like even the Detroit River, they say. When these boats get out here, there's no place for the waves to go as they run in either to the shore or run into the log boom in the back stretches, where they're going right now. The Atlas Van Lines in first place, going after another 400 points. Chip Hanauer's average speed right around 118, 120 miles per hour. As he goes now around the north turn, you see in the background the floating bridge here in Seattle that has been a trademark of unlimited hydroplane racing. Back in the 50s, they used to do what was called the flying start, starting under the bridge and streaking down the shoreline. But here's your winner of Heat 2A, Chip Hanauer and the Atlas Van Lines, 700 points for the day. Rolling into the north turn, the first alternate in today's racing due to the Renault pullout is Kenny Toyota, and finishing second place, Executone telephones with George Johnson out of Seattle. And here's the order of finish. The Atlas Van Lines winning a heat today in Seattle. Executone telephones, Kenny Toyota, Joe Ritchie, Oboy Brito, and of course the Squire shop with more problems. Tough day for Mickey. And for the day, here are the points now. Top 2 boats look good. In fact, the top 3 for getting into the final heat. It'll be tough now for the final 3. We'll have to wait and see. Let's go down to the winner of Heat 2A with Jim Hendrick.
Nice going.
Thank you.
Looks like a little better, but you were kind of high there going into that first turn.
Yeah, we're still having a little trouble getting the boat right just right yet. So we've got some time now between now and the final. See if we can make some changes.
You have to make some changes to keep the front end down?
Yeah, that first heat, Jim, we were kind of all over the place. And
as low as you sit in the boat, though, can you feel it come up?
Oh, yeah. You know, that's what they pay you to do, is have some sensitivity in your rear end. And, oh, yeah, you can feel it.
Okay, that's the story from the pit area down here at the Atlas camp, the winners of Heat 2A.
All right, Jim, and remember the Squire shop was running on the infield at full speed. What was the problem? It was this, a broken stopwatch. Mickey Reeman's watch was a minute off at the start. We'll return to Seattle in just a moment. Jerry Verhill of the Tosti Asti along with driver Steve Reynolds. And right to his left, there is the camera, the Hitachi camera, giving us those great pictures. Let's go to Scotty Pierce with Jim Hendrick.
I've said it before, Don, this young man, Scott Pierce, if he gets a real good equipment under him someday, is going to be a hot-shot driver. He battles his boats all the time. Now, this boat is acting a little better than when you took your flip out in Madison.
Yeah, actually, it's a whole lot better, and it's a credit to my crew that we've got her settled down somewhat, and we're able to go a little bit quicker. But in this the water conditions that we have today, and when it's rough like this, we're really just up against it because our boat's pretty light, and it just doesn't want to go through it.
Scott Pierce down here in the pit area, Don.
And it's rundown time for the final preliminary heat of the day. The Budweiser, good day for Jim Kropfeld. The Tosti, Kawaguchi moving on down the line. Heat 2B coming up. And we near the 12-second mark as again they come around the north turn. And again, American Speedy Printing with Ron Snyder leading the fleet to the starting line down to 5 seconds. Here we go with the start of Heat 2B, and American Speedy Printing is out in front. Inside of him is the U80, the Kawaguchi Travel, and on the far inside, the Budweiser and Jim Kropfeld. American Speedy bouncing along again as they go into that rocky south turn. The Budweiser in first, the U80 Kawaguchi Travel in second, and in the third lane right there, American Speedy Printing with Ron Snyder. The Budweiser with a skid fin digging in, rolling around those 1,000-foot turns in diameter. The Budweiser in first place. Jim Kropfeld out of Cincinnati, Ohio, down the back chute. In second place right now, American Speedy Printing. But let's see how he's doing. Yes, he's rolling along pretty well. Here comes the U80, the Kawaguchi Travel with Ron Armstrong. One of the heaviest boats really in the fleet and better than 10,800 pounds. But it's moving quite well. And on the inside, in second place right now, Ron Armstrong and the Kawaguchi Travel. In third place, American Speedy Printing, Tosti Asti is back a ways. The Budweiser in first place with Jim Kropfeld aboard, looking for his second straight win in Seattle, Washington. American Speedy Printing, as you see, cutting inside as they go around the turn and head down the main chute. The Tosti Asti on the outside. Hey, we got quite a traffic jam. We got about 4 boats bunched up now battling for second place. The Budweiser, the clear leader on the right side of your screen. You see the helicopter above with the officials aboard. The Tosti Asti is now moved up alongside American Speedy. And on the inside, the Kawaguchi Travel with Ron Armstrong. The far inside is the Light All-Star with Tom Dean, another turbine-powered boat. 4 boats going into the south turn with the Budweiser clearly in front. There's the difference between first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. The Tosti Asti with Steve Reynolds out of Seattle now. Looks like he's moving ahead. Yes, he's in second place. You see the Light All-Star right there with Tom Dean, the boat out of Houston, Texas, designed by Jim Lucero. Tom slowly moving up against the Tosti Asti. Again, the Budweiser in first place, but a great traffic jam between 4 other boats. Jim Kropfeld, his first lap been better than 116 miles per hour. The speed's not all that high, and of course, one big reason, the water here on Lake Washington in Seattle. Very turbulent, a lot of rollers. Rollers are much worse than chop for an unlimited hydroplane. Second place to Steve Reynolds in the Tosti Asti turbine. Third to the Light turbine, the Light All-Star with Tom Dean aboard. Into the south turn, back to the Budweiser, the Griffin engines. They have one for every heat. Their boat shop is only a couple of miles away from the course. They're based here in Seattle, as is the Tosti Asti in Kent, Washington, just 30 minutes south of here. The Light All-Star based in Houston with Tom Dean out of Detroit. But the Griffin-powered reliability is really paying off for the Budweiser today. Average speed right now for the Budweiser, better than 115 miles per hour. Again, not that fast, but again, very turbulent waters. Jim Kropfeld waving at the beach as he goes by. Confident driver. They still got a couple laps to go. Third place to the Light All-Star, Tom Dean aboard that Lucero designed boat. It was built right here in Seattle, as a matter of fact, before it was shipped to Houston. Boat's beginning to string out a little bit as we go on the final lap, and Jim Kropfeld and the Budweiser in total control. There's a good picture of the 2.5-mile course here on Lake Washington. The Budweiser, the Tosti Asti with Steve Reynolds, the Vietnam veteran. Of course, Tom Dean and the Light All-Star, the blue and white beautiful boat. And Ron Snyder at American Speedy Printing. He's got a sore shoulder, by the way, his right shoulder. He dislocated it earlier playing softball. There's Ron Armstrong and the Kawaguchi Travel. Very sophisticated telemetry system with that boat, gauging RPMs, propeller use, etc. Quite a boat. And that is quite a boat, too. The Budweiser winning Heat 2B. A perfect day so far. Second place to the Tosti Asti. And third to the turbine, the Light All-Star. Here's how they finished in Heat 2B. The Budweiser, a perfect day with 800 points for Jim Kropfeld, the Tosti, the Light All-Star, and moving on down the line. For the day, the Budweiser, as I said, going great guns. The Tosti Asti KZOK with 338. And it looks right now that the Bud and the Tosti in good shape to make the final. Right now, Jim is with the winningest owner in hydroplane history, Bernie Little.
Second win in a row, Don. Let's get the happy owner, Bernie Little, who's a nervous wreck. I don't understand. You pace up and down all the time.
Yeah, well, Jim, you see the conditions of the water out there, and those boats are flying pretty good. And, you know, these drivers, their adrenaline's going, and they want to win. And, you know, yeah, I get pretty nervous.
You yell, slow down, Jim. Slow down, Jim.
Yeah,
He can't hear you. Why not go to a radio helmet?
Well, I think if I do that, he'll quit.
That's the story from the Budweiser Camp. Winners of Heat 2B. Perfect 800 points so far.
And Jim, the field for the final heat is now set. The Budweiser, Atlas Van Lines, the Tosti Asti, Joe Ritchie, Spirit of Detroit, Executone Telephones, and Oh Boy Alberto got in there. Here's a big part of the 7-Eleven Freedom Cup each year. The Blue Angels always make an appearance. We'll return to Seattle, Washington in just a moment. Welcome back to Lake Washington. I'm Don Poyer with Jim Hendrick. The boat camps have voted, and there will be a consolation race. Here are the boats: the Light All-Star, the Kenny Toyota, Squire Shop, American Speedy Printing, and Island Security System. That's the second alternate. They'll race today. Here we go. And there has been one driver change. The American Speedy Printing will be driven by Milner Irvin of the Renault due to that sore shoulder of Ron Snyder's. Here we go with a consolation heat. On the inside, American Speedy Printing. In lane number 2 is the Squire Shop. In lane number 3, the turbine-powered Light All-Star. This might be one of the finest fields of a consolation heat in years in unlimited hydroplane racing. Here we're doing it on Seattle's Lake Washington in 1984's 7-Eleven Freedom Cup. Around the south turn they go. On the inside is American Speedy Printing with Milner Irvin driving a boat that he has not driven for a number of years. That's the leader, the Squire Shop, with Mickey Riemann. Remember, they're racing for half points. The winner will get 200 rather than 400 points. Again, Milner Irvin back in the boat that was once called the Miss Madison, and that's when he was driving it. He's having a ball right now, going deck to deck or very close to Mickey Riemann and the Union Bay Squire Shop. Into that choppy north turn. And look on the outside. Yes, by the helicopter you can see the Light All-Star, the turbine-powered boat with Tom DeHeath creeping up on the outside. What a great race. This is the best we've seen all day. On the inside, Milner Irvin. On the outside, the Squire Shop with Mickey Riemann completing lap number 1. As you see the Light All-Star, time 115.1 miles per hour for the Squire Shop. On the right side is Milner Irvin with Mickey Riemann, 4th place. The Kenny Toyota Volvo with Earl Hall in his second race of 1984. Mickey Riemann, a man who says he's very much into who I am, what I'm doing, and where I'm headed, is very much in control right now of his wonderful boat. He's in first place with a good battle. You see Mitch Evans here with the Island Security, dead in the water in the infield. He's the son, of course, of Norm Evans, a great driver in his day. On the outside, look at the Light All-Star. That's the turbine-powered boat with Tom DeHeath going deck to deck with the Squire Shop and Mickey Riemann with the Merlin engines. Down the back chute, along the log boom with the pleasure boats out there, getting a close-hand look at two wonderful boats as they scream down the back chute. On the inside, again, there's Milner Irvin. You got to wonder how he's driving that boat, because he's used to the cab-over design, and all of a sudden, he's in lane number 1, the tightest lane, and driving a conventional boat, a boat he has not been in for some time. But in the meantime, you've got very, very experienced drivers. Mickey in the middle, Milner Irvin on the inside, and Tom DeHeath on the outside. What a great show they're putting on for this crowd of better than 160,000 on a gray, wet day in Seattle, Washington. Mickey Riemann in first place with the Squire. The Light All-Star is in second along with American Speedy, and that is the Kenny Toyota. Back into the south turn again. The skid fin throwing the water high into the air. In lane number 2 is the Squire. Again, Mickey Riemann still in first. Second place, you see the second and third place boats. On the left, the Light All-Star behind the Rooster Tail. Mickey Riemann beginning to stretch it out a little bit as he goes down the back chute one more time. American Speedy Printing and Milner Irvin on the inside. Back into that north turn they go. That is the calmer of the two turns. Not quite as much turbulence. The Light All-Star going way wide, trying to keep the speed up, is Tom DeHeath out of Detroit, Michigan. Tom having a whale of a ball right now, just staying on the outside hip of Mickey Riemann in the Squire Shop. Mickey Riemann, there's the Light All-Star. Tom DeHeath, the Squire Shop in first place. Let's get some speeds here. They've got to be close. Yes, look at this. 114, 114, 114. All three of them going at identical speeds after that lap. Still, Mickey Riemann in first place. Coming around the south turn, rather, going back into the back chute. And on the inside still is Milner Irvin. having a great time driving his old boat. That's a Turbo Allison engine, the same as he has on the Renault. And this is the final trip around the north turn. Mickey Reman in lane number 2. Look at how these veteran drivers can hold their lanes, be safe, and yet keep racing. Here it is. This is the sprint for the finish in the checkered flag. On the inside, American Speedy Printing with Milner Irvin. Mickey Reman still with the lead in the Squire Shop as they streak for the flag. Mickey Reman in first place. American Speedy Printing in second place. Third place, the Light All-Star. That's how they'll finish. Fourth place, Kenny Toyota Volvo. Best heat of the day, and probably the finest field you'll ever see in a consolation race. The Squire Shop takes it with American Speedy, Light All-Star, Kenny Toyota, and Island Security System failing to finish. There's a strict rule about unlimited racing. You must have fun. And the Mercury Outboard Company, along with the Miss Texmo, well, they're doing their best. Fresh fruit, you name it. Oh, what a way to go. Don Poyer again, along with Jim Henrik here in Seattle as the final heat approaches. We took the drivers aside and asked them what will be their strategy for the final heat in the 7-Eleven Freedom Cup.
Well, the final heat, I've got to figure that the Tosti, the Budweiser, and the Squire Shop are going to be the biggest competition. The way I see it shaping up is the Budweiser and the Squire Shop are going to fight for the inside. I put my money on Cropfield to get it away from Reman. I think Steve and the Tosti boat and myself with the Atlas Van Lines, I think we'll stay outside, stay out of trouble, protect our turbine engines, make sure that the turbines have good clean air to breathe with no water in it, and good clean water that we can really let the boats get out and roll.
Well, what we're really going to have to try to do with the Budweiser here, I believe, is that I can bog the thing down in the water pretty slow, and I can probably drop down to about 80 miles an hour. And I think I'm going to come around on the start real early, and I'm going to back off and just kind of idle around here barely on plane. And my idea is that these turbine boats, I know for a fact if you drop a turbine engine under about 90% power, it's going to bog down and they can't get it going again. And it might take a lap to get it cleared out. So my idea is if I can kind of suck them up into the start turn up here and get the Atlas and the Miller boat, whoever's going to be out here, I'm going to bring them up here early. That's probably be our best chance if the Atlas and the Tosti are running like they were in Detroit and Madison, where they went out and broke all kind of course records and lap records. That's probably going to be my strategy, I think. Just got to kind of outfox them before the race because they can outrun me during the race.
Well, where I'd like to be at 30 seconds before the start of the race, I've got to make sure that everything in my machine is playing right, and I've got the rest of the competition sized up. I'm going to make the assumption that all the fast boats have survived most of the preliminary heats and we're in the final. The advantage that I have with a turbine engine is that I don't really care whether I'm on the inside, lane 2 or lane 3. This Tosti does so many things so well, I'm content to take any one of those positions just so long as I can hit that starting line flat out, running as fast as I can run, right on the money.
All right, Steve, let's look at the rundown then. A great matchup, at least between the top 3 boats, the Bud, the Atlas, and the Tosti. At the American Speedy Printing Camp, driver Ron Snyder signing a few autographs. Our final heat is just moments away. Stay with us. The final heat is upon us. Chip Hanauer with a last-minute hug from an adoring fan. Steve Reynolds in the Tosti shaking hands with owners Steve Woomer, Danny Walters, the crew member. Jim Cropfeld with the custom of putting ice cubes in his mouth before each race and a last-minute word from Bernie Little. And you go out onto the course in the Tosti with Steve Reynolds. Again, the final lineup. The Bud, the Atlas, the Tosti, Executone telephones, at least those 4, all capable of winning this heat. All 6 boats now up into the north turn with the Budweiser on the inside, slowing down just as Jim Cropfeld said he would. The Budweiser on the far right of your screen. The Joe Ritchie Spirit of Detroit next to him. Out near there is the Tosti on the left side of your screen. Down to the 10-second mark as they come down to the starting line here in Seattle for the 7-Eleven Freedom Cup. The finals are here with a Budweiser in front at the start of the heat. Here we go. The Budweiser in lane number 1. In lane number 2, the Atlas Van Lines charging hard as they go into the south turn with Chip Hanauer aboard. The winner of 3 straight Gold Cups. He won last week in Tri-Cities, Washington. Look at him scream around the south turn next to the Budweiser. The Budweiser in lane 1 with Jim Kropfeld trying to hold off the turbine-powered Atlas Van Lines. But here comes the Atlas. They're deck to deck as they now come down the back chute. Bernie Little, the owner of the Budweiser, watching his boat and watching his driver, Jim Kropfeld, duke it out with a man by the name of Chip Hanauer, the 2-time national defending champion. The Atlas pulling away from the Budweiser as they go down the back chute. You see from the Tosti Asti what Steve Reynolds sees. He's in 3rd place going into that north turn as well. The Atlas Van Lines, the light boat, the brand new boat, built by Jim Lucero, who is also the team manager. Coming down the main chute to complete lap number 1. Chip Hanauer racing in front of his hometown fans, about to complete the first lap of the race. The Budweiser, a rooster tail distance back in 2nd place. Jim Kropfeld and the Budweiser. Here they come now back to the south turn again, and wait a minute. Chip Hanauer has an arm out and he's slowing down. The Budweiser goes into 1st place. Bernie Little, the owner of the Budweiser, he can see it right in front of him as his boat goes past the turbine-powered Atlas Van Lines. Chip Hanauer and the Atlas slow way down. It looks like they're out of the race. The Budweiser not looking back as he goes around the south third. There's Steve Woomer, the owner of that boat right there, the Tosti Asti, and Steve Reynolds aboard. You see him going by the Atlas Van Lines. Chip Hanauer looking at the turbine engine through the air vents. There's the designer builder. What can you say? Jim Lucero. There will be another race in about 5 weeks in San Diego, as a matter of fact. He's still one of the best. But moving on to the race, the Budweiser up on the north turn. Jim Kropfeld hoping to get his 2nd straight victory in Seattle. He's raced here only 2 times, both times in the beer wagon. The Miss Budweiser in 1st place. Let's get a speed on the Bud here in the 2nd lap of the afternoon in the final heat. The Budweiser at 122.2 miles per hour. You're in the 2nd place boat with Steve Reynolds and the Tosti Asti at a speed of 116 miles per hour. 3rd place, George Johnson and Executone Telephones. You see the 3 leading boats at the top of your screen. The Budweiser, again, that choppy water along the log boom. The fans very close there. They get a great shot of the boats as they go by. The Tosti Asti, hard to beat this shot. You can see the rooster tail of the Budweiser, that boat right there ahead of him. But Jim Kropfeld driving for Bernie Little, hoping to get him his 49th victory as an unlimited owner. The Budweiser making its final voyage on Lake Washington. The boat will be retired. It appears that Bernie Little plans to go with either a turbine engine like the Tosti Asti or stay with a Griffin-powered engine, the piston engine. 3rd place belongs to the Executone Telephones with George Johnson. He's out of Seattle as well. Many drivers, many boats performing in front of their home crowds. For the Budweiser, of course, based in Seattle with a new engine in there, a new Griffin engine. They replaced it just before the final heat, as they do in nearly every heat out in the West, is in total control here in the 1984 7-Eleven Freedom Cup. Jim Kropfeld takes the Bud around the turn for the final time. Jim, who was very sick last night with a temperature of over 102 degrees. He's been a fighter today, a gamer. The Budweiser winning the 1984 7-Eleven Freedom Cup aboard the Budweiser.
Let's hear it for the Pistons. Let's hear it for the Pistons.
Bernie Little and Bob Stile, the owner of the Squire Shop. Steve Woomer getting a hug from Bernie Little. Woomer, the owner of the Tosti Asti. He's getting 2nd place. 3rd place, Executone Telephones. So the Budweiser takes it. Coming in 2nd place, the Tosti Asti. Executone Telephones, Joe Ritchie, Oh Boy Oberto, and the Atlas Van Lines, despite setting a new course record in a competition lap of better than 133 miles per hour on lap number 1, fails to finish. For the Budweiser, it was victory number 4 in 1984, and we'll hear from the winning driver and owner in just a moment.
Four victories and 7 races for this team. The driver, Jim Kropfeld, the owner, Bernie Little. And Bernie, you stomped through another one on the docks.
Yeah, I sure did. I've walked about 400 miles a day, but Miss Budweiser was very victorious, won all 3 heats. We don't like to come in 2nd or 3rd. We want to go first, and that's what Jim's done in all his races, and we're real proud of you, Jim, and we're just going to keep it up.
Jim, you were sitting in 2nd place, about 5 boat lengths behind the leader at the end of lap number 1. Did you notice that something blew on the engine of the turbine?
Well, I really did. Coming down somewhere right out here close to the first turn, I noticed something shiny fly off the back of the Atlas, and right then I knew I had to race the race one. But he was running good, and it was going to be a lot of fun there for a while.
It breaks down that the Budweisers won every other race. 1, 3, 5, and odd number 7. So odd numbers are in for Bernie Little and Jim Kropfeld. Back up to you, Don.
So, Jim, you and I have been through 7 races in 1984, and it is turning into a bit of a runaway for the Budweiser in national points. The Union Bay Squire Shop, tough day for Mickey Riemann and company today, but they'll be back. Executone Telephones moves into, well, they held on to 3rd place. The Tosti and Atlas Van Lines, however, move up ahead of the Renault and the Joe Ritchie Spirit of Detroit with 3,168 points. Looking at the rest of the field, the American Speedy Printing with Ron Snyder, the KZOK Machine Band, Oboy Oberto Light All-Star, the Kawaguchi, and congratulations to the Kenny Toyota Volvo and Earl Hall. They competed well today as the first alternate and picked up some more points. Well, that'll do it for the 1984 7-Eleven Freedom Cup in Seattle, Washington. Our congratulations to Bernie Little and to Jim Kropfeld of the Budweiser, their 4th victory in 1984. For Jim Hendrick, I'm Don Poyer. So long from Seattle, Washington.
This has been the 7-Eleven Freedom Cup, brought to you by Ford and your local Ford dealer.